My God, the breath you have given me is fresh. You create it. You form it. You breathed it into me. And you keep me breathing. At some time, you will take the breath away from me. And I will have breathed my last breath in this body. And you will resuscitate me to the life of the Spirit. With each breath still in me, I thank you, my own God, who is also my parents' God, Lord of all spirits, Master of all that happens. I offer you thanks, Cosmic Majesty, and worship you for keeping me breathing. And in this way, with each breath, you give me life anew. Amen. You can change the words for soul and have work or whatever it is. The words we're going to chant to are, into your hands, your holy hands, I commend my soul is a word that's in the book, but my work, my life, whatever you wish to say there, because that word is going to come up a number of times. When you have a melody that comes from the land, it is a stronger melody than a melody that comes from the head. And when Smetana was here in America, he heard a folk tune that was the one we're going to be singing. And he incorporated it later on in the American Symphony. Da-ra-ra, da-ra-ram, da-ra-ra-ra-ram, da-ra-ram, da-ra-ram, da-ra-ra. Na ra ra, na ra ra, na ra 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 ra, na ra ra, ta ra ram, ta ra 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 ram, ta ra ra ram, ta ra ram. Into your hand, your holy hand, I commend my soul. We're going to chant in a moment. I want to tell you something else. When we were sitting quiet before, a lot of stuff was happening. Mic and moving and this and that. That's happened on the outside. On the inside, the same thing happened too. You know, most of the time we think that we have to be so silent and quiet that we don't clear our desktop. But if you don't do that before you do a prayer, a meditation or something like this, you know, it's going to blink up like those advertisements that come in, you know, when you go on the web. So a way to do that is then just to say, okay, what's on the desktop, you know? Assign a file for it and decide when it's going to be an item on your Palm desktop. And after you've decided all these things, you see what happens. It gets a little quieter inside. So that housekeeping that has to happen with voice check and so on and so forth, if you can say, and now let's do an awareness check and see what's bubbling up, that's a good preparation, not only for what we're going to do together now, But also when you will be working with good people, you'll be in the same situation. If you have to do spiritual direction to someone and your desktop isn't clear, there's a thing popping up all the time, and, you're going to give a person a bum steer, So that's not what you want to do. All right. I think I'll take it a little higher, but you'll have to help out with the high notes because you couldn't really get into your voice with it. All right. Into your hands, your holy hands, I commend my soul. Into your hands, your holy hands, I commend my work. Into your hand, your holy hands, I commend my time. Into your hand, your holy hand, I commend my life. Into your hands, your holy hands, I commend my dreams. Into your hands, your holy hand, I commend my soul. I want to sit on the stool so I can see people in the back. And I would like it so that you move your chairs, wiggle them into the right place so that you don't have to have an achy shoulder afterwards, so that we can see each other, because that's important. Sometime I wish that I had more, quote, psychic powers, Would be neat to have him. Being a rabbi, and with extra psychic powers would be wonderful. I don't have them. But God gave me an imagination. And I have the imagination of what it would be like if I had psychic powers. And then I start looking around at the group, because what we are forming here is not that I will present. I've got some stuff up here, and in my life and my experience, but all this is open file to the group mind. You know what I'm saying? I don't know that I have at this point a particular take of where we have to go together. But that not knowing, that commending my time with you to God, and to say that the group mind should shape what we need to know in this time with each other. So when I invite that, in my imagination, I could almost see the connections that are going on between you, The field of caring for each other, the field of, there's such a deep respect that you have for each other, Everywhere else you're crazy, right? When you come together and you're here, then you feel, normal, right? Wonderful, because you have these connections with these people, and that's what Vonnegut calls the karas, the destiny group with which you're involved. And I feel that it's important that you learn how to tap the energy that's in there. Because it isn't for you alone, that whole notion that we operate solo is a lie that was invented in the Renaissance. Give you an example. There was this song, I think Haydn wrote the melody to it. Die Gedanken sind frei, wer kann sie erraten? Thoughts are free, nobody can guess at them. Well, I would say that's BS. Because, what do you mean you can't guess? Somebody comes into the room, before they even say something, you want to say, hey, what kind of vibes are coming in, right? So it's very clear that we have ways of receiving things that are not necessarily on the verbal level, and yet that's where some of the stuff of our connection is about. So, if I were to go a little deeper and would say, going by all the indicators of ambition, what you have undertaken to do is way low on the totem pole. When I start thinking of income, position in the world and all that kind of stuff, it's pretty low on that social scale, right? So why do you do it? Because you have been deployed. If somebody says, I had a choice about it, I'll say, okay. In Yiddish, there's a way of saying, when you want to say a double negative, it becomes a positive. But a double positive shouldn't become a negative, except in Yiddish. Yeah. Right? So when it gets to the place as to how you could be better with each other, there's something that usually doesn't get into, how would I say, the horizon, the event horizon of our life does not bring out so strong those grids of relationship that we have and the issue of deployment in our life. And yet at the same time, if I were to say, in a crazy way, I say we all have been condemned last time around, that we have to go and do civic service, and clean the streets and, clean the psyches and do that kind of stuff, take care of ego shit that's around. I mean, stuff like that, And we said, okay. So here we are. These are the last minute orders I got. When I was saying this thing about the ego in the time of the Renaissance, that sense that we are hermetically closed, that nobody can guess our thoughts, that we are that we are private inside, that is the poker mentality, I got my cards. I don't want you to know what I have. In fact, I want to give you bumps here so that you don't know what I have, right? That's the government. It's playing poker. Now, I know that I wouldn't be a good poker player. Why? Because I'd have the cards and I could make bad face, but the message will be, Zalman has a full house, Zalman has a full Because, I'm telling you this because I'm only bringing into more awareness, that we are not private, that we are linked, and the people who have been talking about non-local phenomena and the kind of synchronicity that happens even with things that are far away, simultaneous things happening because there's the interconnection of the field. When you get to that stuff, that's up here, you know. We are very happy when we see that the crazy thoughts that we have become more and more acceptable in the world, okay? And that's very good. But there is a place where our behavior has to be instructed. You know, our relating has to be instructed by what we know over here. And the deepest truth of them all is that you can't do consciousness in solo. You can't do it alone. We need other people in a way that we could give each other a mutual lift with things, a leg up, as it were. Because my Rebbe once put it so beautifully, he says, why should you have a spiritual friend? Because each of us are endowed by an inclination for good and an inclination for evil. That's the traditional language, okay? So we have an inclination for good and inclination for evil. If two people who care for each other talk with each other, it's two inclinations of good against one inclination for evil, and you win, okay? Now, this sounds like a neat telling, but think about that. Because once we begin to socialize our good, and our deployment, there is something that happens of knowing we are not alone, we are moving into a larger we place. And that is very, very important. If I were to say, what is the illness that the planet is having? I could give it names, like blood poisoning of the rivers, emphysema of the air, and so on. But you know what else? There is the stuff that individual organs and tissues don't talk to each other well. And that illness creates all kinds of depression, dissatisfaction, builds up anxiety, all that. And the more we get into, look, all of us have participated with a certain joy when there is a religious dialogue between, let us say today it would be between Western religion and Islam, yeah? And when we see two people talking with each other with a certain kind of care and love, each one in touch with the highest of their own tradition, It's two inclinations for good against that sickness that divides and can bring in a healing thing. So one of the things that we have to be involved in and become conscious of is social reparation. If I talk about tikkun olam, how do we fix the world up? It comes by creating that social reparation. Think about how we live today. No front porches, no grocery in the neighborhood. From the house into the garage, alienated the whole time until you go shopping, and then you, instead of paying a human cashier, you pay a machine. You know what this means about the social disconnect in which we are in. So when you're going to be counseling people, it's going to be really important to assess what are the inner connectors, the inner fibers that go, who are the significant persons in their lives, and what energies are running there, and is there a way in which to improve the flow of energy there? Could you imagine two people who live parallel lives and they haven't experienced the love they have for each other for a long time? And if you can do something to make the flow of love between them, to enhance that, that's important. but you wouldn't notice it if you didn't notice it. So it's important to become more aware of what are the social connectors that are going on, and the more we will heal this, and the more there will be energy flowing from one to the other, the healthier will the body become. When you're working solo, in a world like we have today, we are not as well off as a Catholic 2 centuries ago. Imagine you're a Catholic 2 centuries ago in a very pious town in Ireland, Italy, or France, okay? And the week goes by, and it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you line up for confession. When was the last time you did it? You know, or what have you got to report, and so on and so forth. Do you understand what that weekly checking in was doing for people? The fact that now they do this general confession and general absolution, 1, 2, 3, so we can get on with the Mass and finish in 20 minutes, you know, isn't the same process that people were involved in at one time. So I want to ask you, who's your father confessor, mother confessor? Because it's necessary to have, like in AA, a sponsor, somebody with whom you from time to time deal with things and become in some way answerable to. Because that thing of not wanting to be answerable to a neighbor, to anybody, you know, is what gives us the society that we have today. And if we want to be a true democracy, and I'm talking politics and spirituality at the same time, if you want to be a true democracy, then that means that the integral center of every citizen in some way gets heard, is plugged in, you know? So now we want to get to understand a little bit more how we work on that relational thing. And one of them is to find somebody with whom you have from time to time the conversations. I forgot which college it was, but there was, you know, we were answering questions. Do you remember that one? Swami Satchitananda, the Steindl Ras, the whole thing. And then one afternoon I was in charge of the session. So I said, before we're going to take questions, you know, like let the guru answer, I want each one on the panel to say what questions they are working on. And there were several of us who did that, and others who rushed to answer us. It was a funny moment, you know, because there is something about being stuck in a role and not being able to check out what are my questions. If you come to your friend, let's say at the time you have your meeting and you bring only your successes, you know, the question that you can ask, very much like the Wesley brothers, you know, the beginning Methodism. How does Methodism start? They weren't happy with what's happened in the Anglican Church because everybody wears a mask there and so on. So they wanted to have the real stuff. So Wesley knocks on the door and says, "Brother, I've come to inquire about the state of your soul." Okay. Now, you get the feeling of what kind of situation that brings about when you can say to each other, okay, so what have you been working on this month? What moral, ethical, spiritual issue have you been working on this month? And there is such an important thing about checking with somebody else, to have another perspective on it. Oy. You know, I've encountered a number of times people who had gotten quickly religious, you know, quickly religious and quickly orthodox in their beliefs and so on and so forth, and become so brittle and so hardened and so enclosed in shells, and it's very hard to get through to them at that point because they're so much working on what Sufis call the zahir, the outside stuff, you know. But if you get to check with your friend and you from time to time say, these are the things I've been working on, then what happens is another point of view that starts coming in, and you get the benefit of the friendship. Can you imagine if every once in a while you call together 3 of your best friends and you say, now in this session, would you please tell me where you've seen me getting off the track where I should be at this time in my life? Okay? Now, remember, to whom are you going to go? You're going to go to each other, you know. Who are the people who would even understand your questions, you know, what's going on? So you'd come to each other. And each time you strengthen that social bond. Each time the flow of energy and consciousness that goes through grows bigger and stronger. I'm gonna turn a page now. Imagine the British sailors and their issue at this point, and 2 sides engaged in saving face and claiming their right. Okay? And on the outer level, there isn't a darn thing that we can do. You know, I can't call Tehran and say, hey, you guys, or call in England. The issue is there another place, another level on which there can go on a certain kind of traffic, if you will, and help change some things? Now, if I were to ask you to vote, is this possible, is this not possible? In some places I would get not possible, most of the people. But if I were to ask you, I think all the hands would go up. Not only is it possible, it's desirable, and we want to be in that number, right? So it's really there, right? So imagine now, this is the way in which I would like to separate them, okay? And I'm pulling from this side and I'm pulling from that side. I want to separate them. I won't be able to do it. And this way I might, okay? So I'd like to take now the next 5 minutes for us to go, first of all, to pool our things, to see if we can get a little telepathic, okay? And then from that place on, go and get a little more slack in this attention that's in this place, so that thing could come apart and that could be a nice, peaceful resolution of the issue. Okay? That's the task of consciousness we do together as a minyan, you know, as a quorum of people. I'm going to sit down here and we do it quiet. blessing of God rest upon you. May God's peace abide with you. May God's presence illuminate your heart now and forever. So where were you? Talk to your neighbor just for a few minutes to exchange where you were, what you experienced, what questions that raised, whatever it is, okay? And then after about 5 minutes, so don't forget to give each other space to respond, I will ask you for some responses from you about what you were talking about, because we need to weave that together, okay? Boing. Boing. Look around how hard it is to stop the conversation, because you're really, really involved with each other. You really are flowing with each other, and that's just wonderful. But now I'd like to have some of you who had a good conversation to take a mic and to share with us a little bit about what your conversation was about. Then we can weave that together more.
Well, I came up with a fairly quick image of the Brits and the Iranians getting together for a weekend festive activities that somehow diplomats kind of set it down, and some cultural exchange people got together and said, well, this isn't any big deal anyway. I mean, why don't we get together and have a big meal and share our ethnic, specialties of food, and dance and song, and we might even throw a soccer game in there for a little fun, except no national teams, just some locals. And it seemed as though somehow they chose a place that they could be comfortable with. Maybe it wasn't quite right in Iran, maybe Saudi Arabia. Seems like their prices being a good go-between, and just between some of the east-west forces now, anyway. And so they agreed to a place they could meet and get together. And after about a weekend of all the festivities, singing, dance, songs, and food, they just kept on going and going and going. This is kind of fun. This is we're kind of.
All right, let's leave the narrative from now and put this up there for it to happen. But that's not the question that I had hoped you would talk about.
Well, I'm sorry.
Don't worry, you did well. I followed you with this thing, including the game. Could you imagine? There is a point at a good game where you don't care anymore whether he's on your side, on the other side, but you see some real special athletic or sportsmanship or something, then you root for them, That was what happened when forgot his name, the black runner at the Olympics in Germany, 1936. Jesse Owens, right? Lots of people who would never have clapped for a black person when they see him do his thing. There is something about that, so thank you. Here's what I wanted you to respond to. Okay. The content of how we saw the thing develop, we put that out. That's where we were. And in order that it should have its power, you know, sometimes writers, when they talk too much about what they're writing, then they don't write. So the energy of the imagery that we put out, that has to go on, and we leave that. What I would like you to talk about is about your process now. Because what was it that you were doing? Was there some clearing of the deck first that needed to be done? And then where did you place yourself and what was going on? And again, a short description of the internal movements that you made so that we could, you know, when they have the stations of the cross, you know, so one after another, but you're supposed to do something there. But if somebody says, well, let me say, I did the stations of the cross, he doesn't have to go through his process now, okay? I'd like you to tell me what were those internal things that you did so that we all can hear that. So there's another mic around, please.
Real quickly, that Steve and I talked together, and we both came to the same place, and that was the breath, into the breath. The breath to clear, the breath to center, and the breath to bring in all the concepts, the breath to bring it into a place of calm, place to bring it to places of shalom, peace. And essentially that was the process. It was coming in through the breath, staying in the breath, and bringing the heart into it.
Okay. My question to you, let's have a little dialogue on this one because it's really good. Okay. We're getting some. When you had come to that conclusion, then what did you do at the end, like to hit the enter button?
Certainly. Yes, I brought in, I personally brought in light. The concept of neuro law, from the Sufi perspective, of bringing in light, which I'm most familiar with.
Yeah.
To bring in light, to bring into the place of feeling or sensing both the energy, if you will, the Iranian energy, I use kind of a sense of flash, or just to represent them, to bring it into my heart, to keep it in mind, and to keep the breathing going, and to release. And for me, it was letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. And really, I don't really have adequate words for it, because it's more a sense of visceral rather than cognitive. I'm sorry, I can't.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, please.
I'd like to embellish what was just said. For me, on my way to the airport coming here, I heard an interview with one of the female sailors. And she was saying beautiful things about her experience. And what was coming up for me was a lot of judgments about, well, quickly, obviously they brainwashed her quickly and that kind of thing. And then when sitting here talking to Saudi, I realized that I wanted to take those judgments and realize how much I wanted to trust what she was saying. And I wanted that connection with what she was saying. I wanted to just take it at the value that was
That still is taking content, but that's fine. I hear what you're saying. You had to put it someplace, and that's where you put it.
I had to put it someplace, but when I realized that what I wanted was to trust what was being said, I got calmer, and I stayed on it.
That helped you also in your being centered in what you were doing.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. That's a priestly function. We'll talk more about that. Thank you. Please.
Hi, I'm Mary. I had an experience where I was, first it was, I guess I did a clearing. I went to the blue sky. And then immediately I was with a child on my chest, and that's, I don't need the story, but, and I was singing a lullaby to this child to comfort and make it feel loved, and or hoping to give give that feeling. And then it was like, God, where are all the lullabies I can learn to sing to this child?
Just, we need to come back to that gift, that longing and that gift of the lullabies. There were some other hands up. You please, come take the mic here.
So, without thinking the word simple, I saw what I was really trying to do is be simple. And the simplest thing that I thought to do at the moment was to just bring forth intention. And it was the intention to harmonize the field amongst us, to be really cohesive. And like this brother said here, I just decided it seemed pretty passive volition really, to be receptive, and felt myself expanding into the force field, and chose to believe that everyone else was coming along with me. So who's force and who's right, I don't know.
Thank you. You still are going very much into, I want to talk more about that imaginal space where you were with the lullabies, but don't go yet so much to the end result. I want to know about the inner, several of you, and some of the things you mentioned of what you did on the inside. That's what's important now, please.
My name is Amina, and what my first impulse was, just like yesterday when we had the circle, and we had the person giving guidance and the person seeking guidance, and all of the different energies around. What my felt sense was that there needs to be someone who hears the cry, and to just be with each one of the people who was directly experienced, and to hold the space for them to feel whatever they're feeling, and to let that be present. And then, kind of like, okay, hear the cry, and is there a way to get that perspective on it? But,
Thank you. I want to say, to underscore this thing, if you're present enough to feel the pain that's involved on the part of the people whom you're trying to help, without it becoming your pain, but still feeling it, and the heart is open, that compassion, feeling with them, tunes into something. And when we talk about lullabies later on and other archetypes that we tune in order to get the archetype of compassion and so on, so very important. Who else? We'll take two more, please. Go ahead.
My first response is to feel that conflict in my own being and go really deep and say that I experienced whatever. I wasn't even aware of the actual conflict, but I figured it's over in the noise, and to feel that I've got that conflict in my own being, and to really find that sense of release in my own being, just like, so that I can let go, and then I just from there to really hold it there and just let it radiate out as love. But in the first place, I just feel it in my own being.
Thank you. One more there, please.
Hi, I'm Habiba. I went very personal on this one. I just went inside and found myself aware of a situation where I had a mentor during my psychology training who was really a soulmate, who was married with a family, and we just had a bond. And he died about a year and a half ago. And after I finished my program, and he would come give presentations where I lived, he just separated himself out and didn't want to connect, and I didn't know why. It was very painful, and eventually I just drew back. But anyway, I knew he had cancer, but didn't really think much of it. And then one day, And it turned out to be a week and a half before he died. I had no idea. This incredible anger swept through me, like, this is not okay to have had a deep heart connection. And not to even just, I want to carry this, I'm going to say goodbye. Not thinking about him dying, just I'm going to say goodbye. I already honored him for so much given in exchange. And I called and found out that he was dying and probably couldn't even talk to me because the throat cancer and the treatments had burned his throat. And yet he was able to talk to me. And then there's the issue in a little email and kind of like me being so gentle in his dying, but, wondering, had I done anything? Like why this separation? And him eventually able to email just a teeny bit, he's quite lucid, saying that his wife had felt threatened by the energy. And that made total sense to me. I understood that. I'd always wanted to honor their relationship. And so we got to do that in the last week and a half, amazingly. And I talked to her, and she and I now stay connected in some ways, yet there's still a barrier. And a while ago I talked to her and I said, if you ever feel it'd be good for you to talk about what happened here, I would love to. And so I went into this deep place of feeling like if we can understand deeply enough and witness each other deeply enough, there's enough room for all of us. And that to feel the love of just not only towards him, but towards her, and for her suffering and my suffering, and that there was enough space for it all. So that's where I am.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. In order to be able to work more on that inner plane, I used to call that which you do on the inside turning the pneumatic keys, turning the keys of the pneuma, the soul, learning how to handle that. Because most of the time, we are sort of passive to what is arising. You know what I'm saying? And in this case that we just heard, a wonderful simile of a possibility of dealing with energies that are like so, yeah? And that there is a possibility, there's a vision. That's how it presented itself. But I'd like you to learn a little bit more to understand below that level where there's a full representation of something coming, what is it that's being done, and to learn how to do that with a certain kind of deliberateness, Most of us are very passive. When it comes, I say I think, very often as I'm being thunked, Something thinks in me. When I want to concentrate in a meditative way and contemplate something, I have to move from the passive way of doing that to a very active way. But here's a problem. When I become very active, it is ego stuff driving it. That active and ego get very close together. If I'm passive, then flotsam and jetsam is going to come up. I still want to do something. So I'm thinking of backstroke. Can you imagine for a moment meditating in backstroke? Okay. It has a sense of surrender to it. There is a goal where you want to go. You're not wanting other stuff, and you're active because you have to move your arms to be able to get to that place, but you're not the same way active as if you're doing breaststroke, where you get into a whole different place with that. Okay. Then there comes the thing of knowing the other worlds in which we operate. And that was such an important teaching that the mystics all over the world brought together, that there are 4 levels of things. There's sensation, there's feeling, there's reason, thinking, and there's intuition. And then they have said intuition is like fire, thinking is like air, feeling is like water, doing is like earth, and so on and so forth, sensing is like earth. And so we have all these things. You see him in Sufism, you see him in the Kabbalah, you see him in Hinduism. There's Hatha and Karma Yoga, there's Bhakti Yoga for feeling, and there's Jnana Yoga for knowing, and there's Raja Yoga for the super duper stuff. And that's good. And all of these seem to match. So how come they match? And the answer is because we are hardwired like that. Okay? And we are hardwired so that we have a reptilian brain, and we have a limbic brain, and we have a cortex, and we have a lot of brain mass that is not yet formatted, if you will. And that's where intuitions start coming through. And if you take a look, these 4 levels, they are always showing themselves that you can almost say one is old yang, the other one is young yang, and the other one, and then you could say it's old yin and young yin. These 4s keep coming up all the time. Most of the time, when we are talking, we are operating on the reason level. But the place where you had to go just now was not on that level. I needed to communicate with you, so I had to use words, But could you imagine if my receptors and your receptors were so beautifully attuned that I could go like this? And all of a sudden we are a choir of holy feeling, bringing, you know what I'm getting at? That's in another realm. We don't have words for that. And yet, the work that you want to do is always going to be clumsy if you don't know how to move in that world. That feeling world, the world where the archetypes are, where the feelings are, and so on and so forth. I once had a conversation with somebody and said, "What's going on?" And the answer I got, "I don't know until I'm talking about it." Okay? The way in which you will be able to map out that realm better is in that world. If I look at those 4 worlds, it goes like this. There's the I-it world of what? Of action, of sensation. There's the I-thou world of feeling. There is a he-me world in which I say, I'm just a datum in this huge universe, That's for the mind. But then there is an I world, I am that I am world, when all what Aristotle calls accidents are removed, what remains is God. So if I were to get you aside and were to say, who are you? And you tell me, and I say, thank you. Who are you? And then you have to give me another one. And then, thank you. And who are you? After a while, you'd get to the place where you'd feel like getting very angry, and then you'd want to say, God! Okay? Right? Because you've gotten to the point where you don't want to say it, right? But when all the other identities have been lifted from you, what are you, right? So what happens is that that place of I am that I am is that highest place. But the world in which we need to work mostly is the world of I-Thou, the world of feeling, the world of relationship. That's where the healing has to come in, because the tissues are not connected good, and we need to do all that kind of work, and it's in the feeling world. In Sufism, they talk about that world under the name Alam al-Mithal. And it's not André Guénon. What's the name of the other French one? Huh? Corbin, thank you. So, there was this man, Henri Corbin, who wrote about the imaginative faculty in Ibn al-Arabi. And he was describing this world that most of us, when we say it's an imaginal world, and you worked with Eve yesterday, and you had a sense of entering into the imaginal world, and that is it's a populated world, and it has laws it has a gravity of its own. Somebody once put it to me this way, he said, the electromagnetic spectrum is on the bottom level. That's on the place of sensation. On the place of feeling is gravity. Gravity is the basic law of love. Two bodies in space attract one another. Get that sense? And then he was talking about the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force. What you get to see is all those fractals of the forces that keep coming up all the time. Okay. I want to go back to the world of I-Thou, the world of feeling. I can't imagine a better way of doing it, but it's all a very hard way, being a human being. You know? You think of what it's like to be part of a father and a mother, and then to come together and be growing in the mother. And whatever consciousness you might have had at that time, or what you brought in from a past lifetime at the same time. And there is a mother, and you become more and more with her one, and then you're being pushed out and you're cut off from that. And today it's very hard to be able to say that we have memory of that. But there was this guy who was doing with people primal scream, you know? And I have a sense that if we were to be able to reach back to that feeling that we had upon being born, coming out from that oneness that we had, I think we would have something to scream about. I could go on with teeth growing and with colic and stuff like that, and what people go through just on the physical plane. Then you go into middle school, you know, and everybody is pushing and trying to shape you, and you try and shape yourself so you get the best feedback, social feedback that you can get, and it's driving your parents crazy, it's driving you crazy, okay? You just go back over a lifetime, you see all the feeling places where we have been. And I think it's important to revisit them. You know, it's important to revisit them because at least you know that they're there, you know what they feel like, how much charge they still have for you, and then if necessary, you can do something. You can imaginally go back to the time. You know, I went back to the time when I was being circumcised and I was holding little Zalman, saying, it's okay, you're gonna make it, you know. It's not so bad. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's a very healing thing to be able to, because in that world, the world of feeling, time is not the same way as in the world of sensation, you know? Look, when you see you get in touch with something from the past, and it's there now for you too. So that's part of what we have to recover when we want to work in the world of feeling. I'm going to say something crazy and something that shouldn't be taken as a measure of pride, but I'm just looking functionally. What am I doing here? I'm here because there's something has to happen between us. And some of it will happen because of words that I will say, thoughts that you will have, and things that will happen between us. But you know what else is going to happen? Because you want to hear what's going on, and I want to hear what's going on with you. I have allowed the strings, if you will, of my cello to tune themselves to the note of this group, okay? And at the same time, you have allowed to tune, as if somehow the oboe had given us an A and the whole orchestra is getting to attune to that, okay? Now, the good thing about that is that as we experience it right now, we want to say to this, Amen, this is good, this is good. I want to be able to get back to that. You know, there'll be some times when I need to really feel that I can go back to this moment. And so what we are doing is we are making, if you will, a date with ourselves. And I don't know what you're going to name that moment here, but you will name that moment in your mind. And maybe Chautauqua 2007, you know. Well, you'll give it some kind of a name. And then when you need it, the image will come back. You'll be able to evoke it again and draw on that. And what's going to happen is that not only are you going to get endorphins from that, that's to say the body will respond with saying, ah, this is good, like chocolate, you know, coming into the body. And the other thing will be that you will be attuning. You will be tuning into what's going on over here, and that will give you a sense. So if I were to say, without making it too fancy, I would want to say, each time you come here, you have another initiation. You get initiated, first of all, to Rabbi Atum, but then to each other in the same way, you know? And you take that vibration along with you. And I wish that people who would get initiated into orders and to religions and what have you, they would go through a thing that they would get to know the same kind of thing, you know, that they're now, from now on, attuned. That's what the bishop was trying to do at confirmation, you know. You have been baptized as a child, and now we're going to confirm it with some oil. You're going to say no to Satan and all his minions, and you're going to connect consciously. Are you ready to do it? Okay, here you are, okay? Well, that is how you do it in the ceremony, you know. But on a deeper level, something else is supposed to happen. And that's what we want to be able to do, because in a sense, you will be secular clergy for people. I used to give a course at Naropa on rituals for people helpers, you know. If you have been working with somebody on a spiritual level, and then a life cycle event comes, you aren't going to call somebody else who doesn't know you, sort of a marrying Sam, come with his black book and say the words, you know. You want to have someone who you have been opening your soul to do that with you. So then you also have to know how to do these things that help people in life cycle events, and it would be good for you to read up, you know, get yourself one of those books that the ministers have, read through it, then decide what you're going to do and what you're not going to do from that, okay? And then see with the people with whom you're going to have the life cycle event to plan the thing out so you can bring in their consciousness, it's their wedding, it's their thing, you know, and so on and so forth, and because you'll have to do that. But when you do this on this plane, and I'm going to ask you, imagine you're about to go and officiate, okay? You have a special garment that you wear when you officiate. You should have a special garment, a stole, a something, you know, when you do that. Preferably one that has been given to you by somebody who appreciates you and loves you, you know, and then you put that on. And when you put that on, something happens. You say, okay, now this is not about me, this is about them, you know, and we have to do something to make it happen. How do you make it happen on a transpersonal plane? Alone you can't. So it's always good to have a friend on the other side. The best friend that I have for priesthood, his name is Melchizedek. Melchizedek is the first one who's mentioned in the Bible as being a priest of the God Most High. When a person is ordained in Roman Catholicism, they'll say according to the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek, the king of righteousness, and there is something about that priesthood. Okay? There was a summit, I think, in Brazil about ecology and so on and so forth. And I was invited to be there too, and His Holiness Dalai Lama was there, and every religion got 6 minutes. He got 20. Okay, you know what? I don't mind. He always has good stuff to say, you know, because in 6 minutes he can't do very much. You know, if he is going to open people up to what he now calls beautifully secular ethics, never mind the religious stuff. My religion is kindness, you know. He says so. So he had the 20 minutes. Question came: what am I going to do in 6 minutes? So I figured this is not a time for talk, because I can't say anything really significant, because everybody got up and said, I'm for the brotherhood of human beings, I'm for the good, and blah, 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 all the good stuff, you know? Like this guy, I saw a cartoon, it was in the Village Voice, about a bunch of guys sitting there taking acid, and one saying to the other, just the same old cosmic truths. You know? But there is a place where you want to be able to get hold of that priesthood. So here I was, and I took a lulav, a palm branch. You all see this Palm Sunday. Palm is important there, and the fruits that go along with that. And I invited the people to chant in their own language, Lord, have mercy, and so on. And I offered to them in Latin and other languages, and I said, and I will chant, Ana Adonai Hoshiana, Lord, please help. Kyrie eleison, it's the same thing. And was about to go and do the work, and then I had to log on, okay? Because if it was Zalman alone doing it, it wouldn't have worked, you know? I had to make room for Melchizedek to come, if you will, and to priest that whole business out and bring down blessing and do that. And we did it, and with each direction that we shook the palm branch, we blew the ram's horn also, and we didn't need 6 minutes, and the people got it, you know? What I'm trying to say is that ritual and a certain kind of liturgical form that is recognizable, that does not have a lot of baggage on it, is always very helpful for creating something where people can come into that space. That's why, for instance, I don't know if you're going to do that, But it would be nice if there was a bowl over there with water inside, and people could dip their fingers in it and just touch their forehead and their heart. You don't have to make a cross. You can make a cross if you want. Okay, but you know what I'm saying? Like a holy water thing. So that creates something about what is the space I'm entering in. This is not just party space. This is something special. Okay. So I would like you to learn more about ritual, about liturgy, and about holy dreams. The long forms of meditation, well, if you can afford it, go ahead. I can't. What I mean to say, if somebody is going to tell you your spirituality will take you 3 hours a day, you'd have to say, sorry, find another customer. At best, I can give you 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. If that doesn't work, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Okay? If that's the situation, then the question is, how do we use that? What do we do in that time? So there is a thing that has to do with a holy daydream. A holy daydream. I wish that teachers would make their kids daydream more. When I want to make the point, I describe how a teacher has just done a beautiful unit about Australia, and Johnny sits near the window like this, and teacher says, stop daydreaming. And that's so silly. The teacher should have said to the whole class, now go and daydream. You know? Picture the thing. Go into that place. So if you look at Ignatian meditation, other forms of meditation, they would have holy daydreams. What was the whole point of reading Bible, reading the Gospel? You remember how they used to begin it in Latin? It was in illo tempore, which translates once upon a time. So, and it would go, Jesus went with his disciples and so on and so forth. Why do they tell you all the details about the fish in it, you know, and the lake and all that kind of stuff? Because they want you to daydream that space, okay? For Jews, it's going to be very important to daydream the exodus from Egypt this coming week, you know? What was it like to be a slave, to work in the clay pits there, and to be persecuted at the same time, and dreaming of another possibility that was promised by a God who is sort of strange from you at that point, okay? So you go, these are things into which we can go. They're like gardens that we can visit on the inside. It turns out that they're not just fiction. That's what I'm trying to say. That there is a real world there. If I want to be more scientific, I go up to the head and I say, all right, go with Rupert Sheldrake, you know, and you call it the, what does it call it? A morphogenic field. Great, you have you can do what you need, but that's not where the heart is. And the heart, you go into that place and you cultivate a garden. I had a friend, a rabbi who had grown up in Amsterdam, and he was in a small town and didn't have anybody with whom he could share any spiritual stuff. And I asked him, what do you do when you pray? He says, I imagine myself in the snoga in Amsterdam, you know? In his mind, he would always go back and see himself in that place, and that's where he was. Because if I want to say the Gedanken sind frei, I'd want to say it's good. We can move wherever we want in there. We can. That's why we call it emotion. You know, you can go someplace with that. And all right, another 10 minutes, then I'm going to have a break with you, okay? All right. Before I do, maybe somebody has some questions about what I was saying, really about this business. We don't have enough words about that world, the world of feeling. So anything that comes up for you that you'd like me to talk about, clarify, find out how to make contact with allies on the other side. Okay. I wish I could tell you. You know, I want to say that I haven't got a finished deal for you. You know, I'm giving you homework. You know, soon is going to be my time to leave. I'm getting older. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. I'm more tired. And if I could help it, I would just sit at home right now and do my own inner stuff that I need to do rather than be with you. It's not that I don't love you, you know, but that's the reality of being in the December years. And I'd like you to think of yourself as people who are going to ask this question strong. There are some people, just a second, get to you. There are some people who have those psychic abilities, you know, and they're good. They also, it's not enough to be a genius with that. It's also important to have a kind of introspective awareness. What do I do and how do I go there? And I've had such wonderful experience with people who had that real strong connection and could report from there. And so, yes, this is your homework, to talk about it, to get it together and to create, if you will, a container so that people who want to work in the imaginal world will have some people with whom they can do the research and development that's necessary over here. Please.
Mine comes like right before that question is what is the consciousness of a person who knows that their life is shortened because of a terminal illness, and how do they face and make that completion? And, you know, I know on the physical level they get their affairs in order, but in the depth of their consciousness, knowing.
I want to say I can't be doing justice to that. This is such an intimate and private thing between the person who's going through that to say I have an answer that can be given all around, it's not so. Yet there are a couple of things that one can say. One of the things is to find out what is the unlived life, what's the unfinished stuff. Because part of what Freud used to call the death instinct is the instinct to finish things. And to have a pain of unlived life, or unfinished stuff hanging, and anxiety, oh, what's going to happen to my family, and so on and so forth, you know. So one can make more and more of that explicit with the person and say, that I can handle, and that you have to let go of. So that it's a process, it's not quick. But that's not the whole thing, there's a lot more. Kubler-Ross had this way in which she put it, that when somebody dies, people are mourning that person. But the dying person has a greater mourning, mourns the whole life, the whole world, you know? And even to be able to be present to that and help with that. But I think it's a very individual work. Yeah. Okay, what do you say for a break, huh? Okay, have a break. There used to be a song, I don't know the words, but I liked the melody and the feeling that it got going in people. It was sort of a Protestant student movement song. Blessed be the tie that binds. Anybody know that? Da, da. Let's hum it, okay? I don't know the words either. Da 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 da. Da 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 once again. Na la 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 You know what? It would be such a wonderful thing if you load up your iPod with some of the old hymns and stuff like that, you know. When you're doing other stuff, it comes in, lead kindly light amidst encircling gloom, or nearer, my God, to thee, or abide with me, fast falls the eventide, and so on and so forth. I'm saying these oldies are all wonderful. I still melt whenever that one comes up. Da 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 da, when I in awesome wonder, da 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 da. Da 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 da, I hear the rolling thunder. Da 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 da, da 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 da. Then sings my soul, my Savior, to thee. How great thou art! How great thou art! Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. You know, that's good stuff, huh? Yeah. You see, what happens is that it engages that space in our heart that I was talking about this morning. So it's really good to have more of that in your emotional milieu. I was asking when I was sitting down now, where do we go from now? And the answer I got was, you don't go. A story. In the desert in Egypt, there lived some hermits. They were known as the early church fathers. They had been an offshoot of the Jewish group around Qumran, the monks of the Dead Sea, spending their time in solitude and from time to time coming together, you know, in a congregation for worship, but most of the time alone. And they had some people who were known as good spiritual advisors. Spiritual direction really for the church starts in that place. So they would come to the monk, who was known as an Abba, or to the nun as known as an Imma, both Hebrew words for father and mother. And they would say, could we have a verbum today? Verbum, a word. Teach us something. And every day he would have a verbum for the people who came. He would give him a word, and he would tell him, work on this word. And of course they would spend their time very much like with the koan, going over that, what is all the deep meaning of what we got in the word. And so they come to Abba Poemen one morning and say to him, could we have our verbum? Two guys, they're regulars with him. And he says, I haven't got one for you. So they say, but every day you give us a verbum, why not today? He says, because you didn't do anything yet with the one I gave you yesterday. So what I got was, it isn't time yet to leave the space where we were, because some of these things are too fleeting. You know what I'm saying? Look how many times you have had great theophanies and how they evaporated, you know, because they weren't labeled, they weren't held in, they were not digested. How would I say? You didn't let them into the womb of your heart. They were only, you know, momentarily there. So it's really important to deal something with that. So I want you to go back again, and not more than 3 people at a time. Talk to each other And this is the topic. Let's see if you can stick to the topic, okay? I know you like each other. I know there's so much delicious stuff you want to share. But see if you can keep that for when you go for lunch and so on and so forth. At this time, I want you to deal with the following topic. What were the questions to which the morning session was supposed to be an answer? Got it? What were the questions to which this morning's session was to be an answer? And I'd like you to spend now 10, even 15 minutes on this, back and forth, and from there, we're going to go again and deal with seeing whether the questions, what remains of the questions, okay? Go ahead.
It's meaningful remembrance around Atum. Yeah, exactly. That makes sense. Yeah. For attunement, so you can actually bring the attunement. I call it crazy too. So, questions in which the morning session was to be an answer. What does the world need more of?
So who is ready to report? And the report to be, what was the question what were the questions to which this morning session was an answer? And you need to talk loud because I don't know the
questions are variation on the same theme. How do you create an authentic field in which to connect, in which to foster change in the world? How to keep yourself authentic, grounded, and open so you're able to connect with that field. And how are the ways to connect with allies on the other side to help you do this work?
Thank you. Anyone else would like to add?
I can say it now. How do we become aware of and access the deep connection we have with not only all of humanity but all of creation? Who are we as spiritual friends or guides? Who are you? What are you to do? How do we as a community support each other? How do we continually do our own work so that we can offer people space? How do I open the womb of my heart? And then how do we work on a different level in the imaginal realm? How do we trust our experiences and our work in the imaginal realm? How do we bring back those experiences and ground them?
Amen. Well, I see. You see, the amplification comes in. This is how true this is. Okay. I think that if you can begin to recognize what's happening in the world in the same way, there's a place called the Saddleback Church in Anaheim, California. Do you know about that? He wrote this book, The Purposeful Life, and A Life of Purpose, something like this, Purposeful Life. Purpose-driven life, thank you. And what's exciting about this is that while there are 22,000 people sometimes there on a Sunday morning, they still have a cohesion. And the cohesion comes due to the fact that during the week, people will meet together, 7 to 10 people will meet together, and will have the opportunity to work on their spiritual life, to talk about these things. If I were a rich man, what I would like to do is to take each one of those questions and assign them to a group of 3 to 7 of you, to Skype each other, to meet, to talk, and to try and get together the spiritual, if you will, the emotional armamentarium. Because most of the time, when someone prescribes for you a way of doing things, it's hard for them to forget their own makeup. You know? Aldous Huxley wrote a remarkable book. It was called The Perennial Philosophy. And inside there was a chapter on temperament and religion, in which he points out something very wonderful, that you have to see the religions in terms of the temperament of the founders too. The Buddha has always done the wrong way. You know, if they did the Buddha right, they would do him like some of the times the Christ is shown. Hollow cheek, you know, the ribs showing, you know, and so on. He just got through with the samana sitting under the tree. I'm sure he didn't have a good dinner. He barely survived. And he had a big Adam's apple. And he was very much the cerebrotonic person. Very much in his head, the noble truths, you know, that kind of stuff. The way in which they depict Jesus doesn't make any sense. I once saw a crucifixion in which Jesus had a nice round belly. And you know what? It may not look nice on the picture like this, but it tells a greater truth. You know, do this in remembrance of me. Eat something, drink something. You know? he has been accused of being the wine bibber and the glutton by the people, right? So what you have is the mind of a person who is very much in the heart. You know? I have so much love for you. There's 5 loaves and a few fishes are going to do it for you. You know? You get the idea? The first miracle at the wedding of Cana, you need more wine. You get the idea? Moses is the only one who sort of gets depicted decently, you know? I'm not saying this to Moses' fame because you say, you know, with them tablets. But if you ask Moses, you know, what do you believe in? He would say, I believe in doing this and doing that, you know. He is a somatotonic person, at least how he is well depicted, because as you look, 613 commandments, you get the idea? And another person might say, there's only one commandment, love one another. That's all there is to it, you know. That's all there is. So you see that the individual differences play a very strong role here. So if you are going to work together, instead of saying that we'd like to have all the same people in that work group, to be able to say we need 3 gunas. We need a sattvic person, a rajasic person, and a tamasic person. You get the idea? And we need to have people, each one with their different way of being. Because most of the time what has happened is, if you're not like me, then you're a heretic. Or if you're not like me, then I don't want to deal with you. But here's the whole point is to overcome the thing of, if you're not like me, how we can work together, by the recognition of what you bring to the table, okay? So, when the rabbis have said the world stands on 3 things, on learning, on good deeds, and on prayer, you know? So you have these 3, and you need each one of them, but not everybody is an adept in all 3 ways. And that's why we need to be together with other people and learn how to do that, which is the beginning of what I call transpersonal sociology. The sociology of being together on this other level, you know, not merely encased in my skin, but where our auras mesh, where all that stuff is happening. So these are good questions for you to work on. Every tradition has in it some people who have a kind of miraculous power to them. Today on the internet they have a story about a nun who was healed from Parkinson's by addressing the late Pope and asking for his intercession, and she gets cured by that. So you need a couple more of these miracles and then he becomes a saint, right? And what's the business of a saint? That people then know, to this saint you go for this, and to that saint you go for that, right? And Saint Anthony helps you find lost stuff, you know, that's how it goes. When people go to a dargah, to the gravesite of a holy person, it's the same kind of a thing. We need you to be our intercessor. You stand for this kind of approach and way. So when you are working together, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, remember that wonderful saying, where you're working together with other people in this way. Could you imagine what that would be like if we had some place in the world, something like a traffic control center in which there would be 7 rishis from different traditions, men and women, doing duty 4 hours a day, holding the trouble spots of the world, you know, in their loving awareness. And then they go and do other things because it's very hard to stay more than 4 hours. But could you imagine who those people would have to be? They would have to be the people who are adept at what we say the shamans are doing and the holy men are doing. Do you get the idea? People who can do that, who can be conduits, not of my power, but rather of what needs to come down here. You know, there's this very beautiful image here. If people would be able to understand cleavage as the place where mother love flows from, rather than erotic incitement, you know. This is such a holy mother picture here. And when you get the sense of transmitting that which wants to come down, it wants the kids to be good, it wants the kids to be happy, you know. It wants all this to come, that flow, that a divine generosity wants to send down. Then if you can get the people who could laser-like, you know, focus that generosity at the difficult hotspots of the world, could you imagine how wonderful that would be? Right. So, I'm telling you about this because I don't know if I'll see this in my lifetime. But there are some people who've been advocating for the Department of Peace in the United States, and there are some people who have said that this is going to undermine the sovereignty of the country. Sure it will. It sure will, because it sets up the sovereignty of our mother the world, our mother the planet. It's her sovereignty that we are concerned about, so that she should survive healthy in a good way, that our children's children and their children's children should be able to have a place where we could continue to grow consciousness and do the right things. So it's just wonderful. No flash, please. Okay, it always just gets into my eyes afterwards. Thank you. So, such a vision needs to be put out, because I feel that sooner or later something is going to happen about that. So when they used to say visualize peace, you know, I would like you to try and visualize the time when there will be something, you know, it just gets so soft in my heart. People I would speak about the spiritual government of the world, you know? A way in which there would be, government isn't a good way either, you know? Would be a lot more like household. How would Mama God want the kids to work the household? Okay, I'll wash the dishes later on. You know, there is that element of collaboration that this brings along. So somebody once told me she doesn't want to be a patriot, she wants to be a matriot. You know? Wouldn't it be great, a matriot law to be in the United States? And so notice what I'm doing. I'm putting out dreams that way. And dreams have a way of attaching themselves to people. Could you imagine if the MacArthur Fund, you know, the people who give those grants, would hire, I'm dreaming, you know, a good dream, would hire the best advertising agency and would say that the frame of human awareness today needs to be changed to one that is ironic, that is peaceful, that is loving, that is healing. Here you have a grant of so many millions, go ahead and prepare for that. You know? It's a dream. But notice what's behind this dream. Behind this dream stand some archetypes. So I want to talk a little bit about archetypes. Say that even the hard wiring is based on something. You know? It is that dimensionality that's in the universe for which we human beings have been put. And there are some people, cosmologists, who are talking about what they call the anthropic principle. They say that the details of, from the Big Bang on, that it should be all in those nanoseconds at the beginning, with those quantities of energy and so on and so forth, and how they work themselves out, that it was necessary that there should be that kind of precision, including the fact that water, when it freezes, rises rather than settles down. If you go through all those things that people line up, if that design isn't intelligent, I don't know what is intelligent design. But I don't want it to be hijacked by the fundamentalists, you know, it's another story. But I see that there is all that stuff there. And if you have ever had the opportunity of looking at those Mandelbrot fractals. If you have ever had a chance to look at those fractals, then you get to see how they replicate themselves over and over and over and over again. When Plato was saying that there are some original ideal beings, as it were, that there are certain forms that are endemic to the universe, he was trying to say that there's a grid in the universe that holds it together the way in which it holds together. And that has, like those fractals, certain forms. Those forms don't have substance. That's a very important part. They attract substance to themselves. But they have these forms, and these forms replicate themselves over and over again. So if I ask myself, what is in that whole vertebrate thing, you know? Where we have a spine, where we have legs, where we are, you know, where there is the information superhighway going through the spine from the brain, that kind of thing. I'd want to say that too is because there is an archetype of vertebrates around there. And that is the big super duper one, that even in a little mouse and a mole, it'll show itself over and over again because it'll have replicated the same shape. Differently and yet the same, you know. That's why we call it the universe. In the universe, you have one polarity that goes toward the one, and the other polarity goes to diversity. And everything in the world, you can say it is like everything else, and then everything else, even twins, you could say they're not the same. You know what I'm saying? It's uni and verse at the same time. So, in the search for those archetypes, people have come up with the archetype that I want to spend more time on. There are more archetypes. For instance, when I'm doing spiritual eldering, I'm working with the archetype of the ancient wise one. Okay? Today I want to work with another archetype. In the West, people have been calling it the Sacred Heart of Jesus. If you have sometimes seen the pictures in which they have sort of like, instead of the heart, there's a pomegranate there, you know, that's open, drawn like this. It's trying to catch in some form something that is in the center of the center, that's in the center of the heart. In the sacred sanctuary in Jerusalem, and before that in the desert, they had two angels. They were calling those two angels the cherubim. They were embracing each other, and they had wings that cover each other. And you may have seen a picture of that, those two beings with the wings embracing each other. According to the Talmud, one was in a masculine form, the other one in a feminine form. And despite the fact that many people wouldn't like me to say that, they were embraced in yabyum with each other. And when they were in that embrace, it was a sign that God was with his people. And when they were back to back, was a sign that things were not good, that they needed a kind of return. In Dharamsala, we had the opportunity to go and visit in the library of the Dalai Lama. And you may have seen those mandalas, those forms painted, you know, the squares with the centers and all that kind of stuff inside of them. And we always see them two-dimensionally, and when they do them in sand, they're two-dimensional mandalas. There we saw a model of the Kala Chakra mandala, one of the most sacred mandalas that they have, built like a little dollhouse in 3 dimensions. And on the second floor, there sat the Bodhisattva with 1,000 arms embracing everything, very much like those wings of the cherubim. And when I was up at the stupa, I was able to go in and see the way in which they have that embrace shown there too. And it is remarkable. It is as if there isn't a situation in which a person couldn't come and say, look, kiss my boo-boo, you know? The place where we go when we are regressing into a childhood place where we have pain. And we want someone to be there to kiss our hurt. That place to which we can go, you know, is the source of love, of compassion, of healing, of all that stuff. And I'd like you to be friends with that source. And I can tell you it's not all going to be a joy, because that's also the source that feels the pain of everything. It couldn't be compassionate if it wasn't open to it. So if you have a sense of what it must be like to be on Good Friday on the cross, and to be torn in all directions and having such a weight on your shoulders and say, I want to bear it for everybody's sake. I want to bear that, you know? So when Christians jump past Lent and past Good Friday and they just go hunt for eggs on Easter Sunday, you know, they haven't done the homework that this is supposed to be about. So that vulnerability and openness, one needs to have access to it and also know how to be shielded from it. Both of these things are necessary. If I were to try and explain it in Kabbalah, I would say you have to go to the place of Tiferet in the world of Yetzirah. That's where the Sacred Heart is located. On higher levels, something else is happening. On lower levels, something else is happening. But that place from which there is a ray going out with that thing. If you've ever seen people carrying a monstrance, do you know what I'm talking about? A monstrance is like a cross, and it has a little opening that is covered with glass, and into which they put a consecrated host. And the priest goes and shows that to everybody as if to say, I bring to you the very presence of God in this thing, okay? If you got the sense that, if you've seen the monstrance, that you know they always have those golden rays going out from that center. And that's something about a visualization that's necessary. For Jews, I would say you go to the place between the Vav and the Hey of the divine name, because we don't do it so, you know, visually. But basically, it's in the heart space, where that place, you align yourself in the heart space with that space. Oi, Zalman, you make it terrible. I thought I'm gonna find it easier. And here you have laid on me a big wagon, a big load. Shame on you. So I'll tell you a story. There's a guy, I'm gonna call him Yankele, and he has just been to the market and he has bought a sack of potatoes, and with the sack of potatoes he makes his way home, walking. Suddenly he hears there's a wagon coming behind him, and the local landlord sits in the wagon and says, Yankele, come, I'll give you a ride. He's so glad. He gets up there with a sack of potatoes on his shoulders and sits while the wagon takes him. So the Lord says to him, you're sitting in my wagon anyway, why don't you put it down? He says, not enough that your horses have to schlep me, they should also have to schlep my potatoes. So I would want to say, just put the peckle down, you know? Put it down. Don't think that the one who thinks that he has to carry it is Prometheus. You don't have to carry it. You just put it down, you're sitting on the same wagon, you're being used, you know, you're being deployed. And that's the job that you have. To know that this is there, that you can reach for it, but it's not necessarily that you have to carry it. You have to nurture it. You have to spend some time with it, you know. To be in touch with it for yourself. If somebody says, hey, stop your self-pity. If I don't have pity on myself, who's going to have pity on me? You know? It begins with a sense of saying, I have compassion for myself. There is a level in which The stewardess is right when she said, before you put the oxygen mask on your child, put it on yourself, because you need to. If you aren't going to be together, you won't be able to help anybody else. Take a look how many forms that place has. Kuan Yin, another one, you know. Korean Zen people will chant Kwan Zum Bozol, Kwan Zum Bozol, Kwan Zum Bozol, invoking the compassion of Kuan Yin, Kwan Non, Kwan Zum Bozol. So it's that sense of being able to say, to be transparent. Most of the time, if I were to be able to look at most people's ways of where are we transparent, we all have the equivalent of bras and panties on. It's somehow as if we couldn't show to God all the other parts that we have hidden. I think it's going to be really important to see ourselves more and more transparent. By allowing the transparency to be there, then who is carrying it? The wagon is carrying it, and you're not carrying it anymore. You're carrying only as much as you are opaque to God. And if you had a sense of what is hell to be so totally opaque to God, that you have to carry the whole works. And that was some of the problem that the early existentialists had, There is no God, and I have to take all responsibility. It's impossible to live with. We are soon coming in for a landing. How do you feel about the little stories I throw in? You like them, yeah? Go and find stories. You will forget the stories you read very quickly if you don't tell them to somebody. You read a story that touches your heart, you're going to want to tell it to somebody. There's been one of those beautiful stories making the round about a little girl who needed a blood transfusion. And she had a younger brother. Remember reading that story? And he was told that his blood was compatible to hers, he could save her life. And they asked him if he'd want to do it, and he said, if you let me think about it. And the next day he said yes. And they put him on a gurney next to his sister. And after a while he asked, when am I going to die? Because that was what he was prepared to do in his mind. No, you hear a story like this, what does it do, It just goes to that hard place. So I'd like you to have stories like that. And sometimes points you want to make about the spiritual direction that you have to offer. And you try and say it in words and it doesn't go so well, and you tell a story and right away it's there. I feel suddenly that my energy is gone. I wanted to go for another half hour. I don't have the energy left. So I want to give you a good blessing. I want you to have a good Shabbos here. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. What time do we start? 2:30. So God willing, I'll be here at that time at 2:30, and we'll continue with things. And and meanwhile, think of a blessing that you need. If you look at your desktop, what is saying, oh, this needs a blessing very badly? Yevrecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Yireh Adonai panav elecha v'chuleka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May good blessing come to that, good empowerment, to the inclination for good in all of you. a renewal of the contract of deployment, and with it, a good budget for all the necessities of life. And let's say Amen.
Amen.